So here we've got the top collar now, and the top collar is the one that we put the interfacing on, so it's just got a little bit more body. We have notches here, so there's a notch here on both sides, and then there's the centre back notch, and this is to sew the collar onto our neckline.
And they're the shoulder notches, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So these line up with the shoulder seams on our yoke. What I'm going to do is just clip in, so you can measure it if you want to, but we're just clipping in 6 millimeters. Actually, that's probably a little bit more than that. Don't go too crazy with your clipping. You're probably better off clipping in slightly less than slightly more. Okay, so just those clips. Now what we'll do is we're going to fold that back. So when we sew this, we're not going to do a back tack here. We want the back tack to be on this piece here. Because we want the back tack to be within the seam allowance. So all this row of stitching is doing is literally holding this little flap of fabric up. And it's one of the things that you have to do. It actually makes no sense at all at this stage, but as we do the collar, it'll make more sense. So you can see there, I've just run off and finished the stitch line inside the seam allowance here. Same at the front. Okay, that has sort of got a slight wobble to it, so you could press that as well if you wanted to, but I'd probably leave that until we press the collar in general. So now that we've got that bit done, we want to sew around the edge of the collar. The good thing about doing this too is that it shows you that that's the neckline, because sometimes people sew this way for the outside of the collar, but you actually need to sew up to the point along the long edge and then back in again. So this is just a foot width, or 6 millimeters. And what you can do here too, when you come up to the corner, is you could mark it with a pen or pencil if you wanted to, but mark but where the 6 millimeters is, and because this is a point, it can get a bit strange sometimes. So you can leave your needle down into the fabric and then turn the corner, and sometimes you can see if you need to do a whole other stitch or not. And then you're going along the top edge, so match up your other edge, or other end of the collar there, and then we're just going to stitch along this edge, and then just use your fingernails to keep this even as you go along, making sure that you can just see the under collar as you go along. So I get to the other end here, and I've turned it around, and I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think I can go a whole other stitch, because then I'll go too far. And then make sure you back tack at the end here. So there's our collar point. Actually, looking at this, it looks like I could have gone another stitch, but I'm not going to worry about that. So now we just need to trim the corners away. Generally, I don't trim corners away on things. I only use it, or only do it when you've got something as pointy as this collar that you're dealing with. If it's a right angle, I just fold the corners, but because this is pointy, I'll snip into the corners.
Just don't cut too close to the stitching, or you'll end up with a hole.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like, no less than 1.5 millimeters from the end there. Sometimes people, what they do when they get to the corner, they reduce the length of the stitch, which makes the point more secure. But I actually never remember to do that.
I've never done that.
I remember to do it after I've actually sewn the collar. I mean, I could go back and sew over the top of it, I suppose, but.
I mean, you can't. It's very hard to get a perfect point. It's going to be a little bit rounded, just because of what's inside.
Yes, because there's quite a lot of seam allowance in there. So I'm just using. You can see there, it's not quite that pointy, So
It's fine though.
this is, well, I'm going to pull it out a tiny bit more. Well, yes, Libby's saying be careful because, and I did it with the sample that I showed you at the
Very
beginning.
easy to end up with a hole.
To just, yeah, and pull out, because you've got that 2mm seam allowance in there, it's easy to pull the threads out. So again,
Yeah,
be less aggressive
maybe
than
don't
more.
use the pin if you're not sure. And really, a little bit of rounding is fine.
They do have, in production, they do have a little, well, it's not really a machine, it's like a manual machine to get these corners pulled out. I thought we used to have one here, but I don't know whatever happened to it. Anyway, so there's my corner, and it is slightly round. The good thing about the top stitching that I'm going to do here is that because it's not right on the edge, it's not quite as noticeable. Well, it doesn't make the point look quite as round.
So you're opening up this seam allowance in the...
Just giving it a bit of a finger press open here, because
good.
we're going to fold that outside edge. You could press this with an iron, but that means
Just
I'd
to
actually,
get it all out, so you
I'd
don't
have to
end
get
with
up.
a tuck on that edge.
Yes, because with this fabric in particular, it's like when I wiggle it around, it doesn't seem to want to move very much. So just try and get it so that, you know, like you can actually see that seam right along the edge there.
I usually press it at this stage to make sure none of the facing's showing.
That would
Doesn't
be a
look
good
very
idea,
good if
Libby.
you've got the facing sticking out after you sew it.
So yeah, so just try. You can also get your tailor's awl, and you can sort of like pull that out a little bit as well.
Yeah, the more experience you get, the easier you find doing things like this without pressing, but
Yeah, so just make sure that bottom, you know, like that you can't actually see the under collar as you go along. Because if it's sticking out and then you sew it, it's going to be then held in place by the row of stitching.
yeah, that wouldn't be considered acceptable for a garment going into a shop.
Yes, one of the best things you can do as a sewer is look at other people's sewing. And just, you know, like, because the acceptable standard of garment production in the world now is really very high. So what I'm going to do here now, I'm going to continue, so I've done that stitching around there, and I think I'm just going to continue this row here
Just tacking it.
and just
together.
tacking these two layers at the front together, because they'll be sewn together as one. And remember,
Just don't go outside the stitch line on that.
Yeah.
Otherwise it'll be showing.
so I've got a 6mm stitch line here, but so I've sewn it sort of just in the middle of that, probably 3.5mm or so you can't see it. And now I'll just give this a press, but we won't show that.